The quiet countryside of Gloucestershire usually offers a tranquil escape from the relentless noise of the modern world. But today, its ancient trees and rolling hills stand witness to a gathering that represents a seismic shift in the landscape of the British monarchy. For years, the distance between London and California seemed immeasurable, a vast expanse of unsaid words, broken trust, and public grievances that many believed would never be bridged. Yet, beneath the surface of this historic institution, the gears of family dynamics and institutional survival are constantly turning, sometimes in ways that stun even the most seasoned observers of the royal court. To truly understand the gravity of what has just unfolded, one must look past the carefully manicured press releases and peer into the quiet corners of royal estates where the real decisions are made, away from the flashing cameras of the international press corps. It is a world where a simple scheduled gap in a calendar or a sudden change in travel plans can signal the resolution of a bitter conflict or the beginning of an entirely new and complicated chapter. As we begin this deep dive into an extraordinary day that has redefined the boundaries of royal relationships, I want to invite all of our viewers to become a permanent part of our community by hitting that subscribe button right now. By subscribing, you ensure that you never miss our deep analytical breakdowns of the events shaping the monarchy, and you help us bring you the exclusive insights that the mainstream media often overlooks. Our journey on this remarkable Friday began not in the grand drawing rooms of a palace, but in the utilitarian surroundings of the National Exhibition Centre in Birmingham, where a media event was underway for the upcoming Invictus Games. The atmosphere at the venue was distinctly bleak, a somewhat deserted and vast space that felt more like a quiet holding pen for journalists than the staging ground for an international sporting phenomenon. The setting itself felt rather rubbish, a cold and empty hall where a handful of photographers and reporters stood around waiting for the arrival of the Duke of Sussex, who had spent the preceding days enduring what could only be described as a catastrophic week in the public eye. Given the relentless legal defeats and the bruising headlines that had just battered his public standing, the press corps was fully prepared to witness a man carrying the heavy burden of failure. We expected to see a defensive posture, a carefully managed appearance designed to hide the immense strain of a prince who had seemingly lost his footing in his ongoing battles with the British establishment. Yet the moment the doors opened and Prince Harry stepped into the room, the collective expectations of the gathered media were instantly shattered. He did not walk into the centre with the hesitant step of a defeated man, nor did he wear the grumpy, defensive expression that has frequently characterized his public outings during times of intense personal and legal stress. Instead, he literally bounded into the deserted hall with an enormous radiant smile plastered across his face, looking remarkably vibrant, energized, and completely at peace with the world around him. His entire demeanor was an absolute contradiction to the reality of his recent circumstances, causing a wave of confusion to ripple through the press pen as journalists looked at one another in utter bewilderment. This was not the behavior of a man whose multi-million-pound court cases had just been systematically dismantled, nor did it look like an individual who was deeply upset about losing his official security status in his homeland. The sheer joy radiating from the prince suggested that he possessed a profound piece of knowledge and absolute certainty about an upcoming event that completely eclipsed the negative news cycles dominating the morning papers. As the morning progressed, the mystery behind Harry's exuberant mood began to unravel when a highly significant piece of information started circulating among the reporters huddled in the media enclosure. This was far from a vague rumor whispered among low-level staffers, because the detail had been explicitly and formally published on the ITV website by Chris Shipp, a veteran royal editor who is widely known to maintain exceptionally reliable and direct pipelines into the Sussex organisation. Chris Shipp himself was present in the press pen, looking distinctly pleased with himself, holding the air of a journalist who knew he was sitting on the scoop of the season while the rest of the media pack scrambled to verify the details. The information spreading through the crowd was nothing short of explosive, indicating that the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, along with their young children Archie and Lilibet, were scheduled to have an exclusive meeting at Highgrove that very evening. The revelation immediately reoriented the entire focus of the day, transforming a routine sporting preview into a high-stakes vigil as everyone began to calculate the logistics and implications of such an unprecedented family gathering. Attention instantly shifted to the carefully guarded schedule of the king, whose movements across the country are tracked with intense scrutiny by a specialized group of veteran correspondents. While standard observers might only see a blank space in a public itinerary, those embedded within the royal apparatus began receiving a series of urgent notifications on their mobile phones, indicating that the monarch's afternoon commitments were shifting. The king was scheduled to finish his official engagements in Oxford by 3:30 in the afternoon, leaving his calendar entirely clear for the remainder of the day, with no further public appearances or official duties listed on his docket. Oxford sits a relatively short distance from the Highgrove estate in Gloucestershire, and with Prince Harry located just 90 minutes away in Birmingham, the geographical pieces of the puzzle were falling into place with astonishing speed. The realization that a major family convergence was actively taking place caused an immediate wave of adrenaline to surge through the press corps as the historical weight of the moment became undeniable. By mid-morning, the tension at the National Exhibition Centre reached a breaking point as it became glaringly obvious that the official event was no longer the primary story of the day. In a mass exodus that began around 11:45, journalists, photographers and technical crews began piling out of the venue, abandoning their positions in a desperate bid to reposition themselves closer to the unfolding action. The sheer panic of being caught in the wrong location drove the movement, as members of the media scrambled to secure vantage points along the routes leading to Gloucestershire. It was a moment of pure professional chaos, where years of experience told every seasoned reporter that the traditional boundaries of royal reporting were being rewritten in real time. The quiet, empty halls of Birmingham were left behind as the focus of the entire media apparatus converged on a single private estate, ready to witness the culmination of a long and painful family drama. The mass departure of the press corps from Birmingham signalled the start of a frantic logistical race across the English countryside, as the media apparatus scrambled to capture what was rapidly turning into the story of the year. Yet just as the focus shifted decisively toward Gloucestershire, a sudden and unexpected countermove emerged from another corner of the royal household, adding a layer of deep tactical complexity to an already tense day. Information began to emerge regarding the Prince and Princess of Wales, who were scheduled to attend a charity polo match in the historic surroundings of Windsor. While their attendance at this annual sporting fixture was a matter of public record, a series of highly specific suggestions began to filter through to select media channels, hinting that William and Catherine might choose this exact afternoon to bring their own children out into the public eye. This subtle injection of news acted as an immediate disruptor, creating an agonizing dilemma for the international photography agencies, who are permanently terrified of missing a major visual moment involving the future heirs to the throne. The timing of this disclosure felt entirely deliberate, forcing picture editors to split their resources and leaving a significant portion of the press pack paralyzed with indecision as they tried to weigh the value of a guaranteed public appearance in Windsor against the high-stakes gamble of a tightly guarded private reunion at Highgrove. Despite the distraction of the polo field, a dedicated contingent of photographers broke away from the main group and cleared off toward Highgrove, determined to establish positions along the perimeter walls in the hope of capturing a historic glimpse of young Archie and Lilibet entering the estate. The sheer anxiety within the media ranks was palpable, as everyone calculated driving times and highway routes while the afternoon sun began to dip over the Gloucestershire hills. For the journalists who had already committed to returning to their home bases, the tension did not dissipate with distance, but rather intensified with every passing mile. It was only upon landing back in Dublin that the true climax of the day's manoeuvres was finally delivered to the inner circle of the Royal Press Corps. Literally 5 minutes before the aircraft doors opened, a formal notification flashed across the highly restricted Royal Rota WhatsApp group, confirming that the long-awaited meeting had officially taken place. This was not a vague piece of gossip, but a definitive background briefing issued directly from the senior communications team at the palace, carrying all the institutional weight of an official statement. The King and Queen had indeed hosted the Duke and Duchess of Sussex along with their children at Highgrove, marking an astonishing moment of capitulation that sent shockwaves through the corridors of power. To fully understand the profound significance of this meeting, one must trace the intricate web of briefings and public revelations that set this entire sequence of events into motion several weeks prior. The first definitive indications of this dramatic family convergence emerged during a high-profile broadcast on the Sun newspaper's digital network, hosted by the well-connected commentator Bronte Coy. It was during this specific broadcast that the exclusive revelation was made that Meghan and the children would absolutely be accompanying Harry on his upcoming journey to the United Kingdom, defying the widespread expectations of the British public. Despite the immense skepticism that followed that broadcast and the endless series of public denials and institutional roadblocks that characterized the intervening weeks, those with deep insights into the Sussex organisation maintained a steady confidence that the meeting would ultimately materialise. The driving force behind this absolute determination to secure an audience with the monarch was rooted not in simple family affection, but in the increasingly stark commercial realities facing the couple across the Atlantic Ocean, the grand American business empire that the Duke and Duchess had attempted to construct over the last 5 years was showing undeniable signs of a severe downward spiral that threatened their long-term global standing. In the immediate aftermath of their departure from active royal duties, the couple had been courted by major global streaming giants, securing production contracts valued at tens and hundreds of millions of dollars, based primarily on the immense global curiosity surrounding their royal status. However, as the years progressed, the initial novelty faded, leaving behind a trail of cancelled contracts, stalled projects, and a distinct lack of cultural impact. The commercial pressure had mounted to such a degree that the couple's latest venture had been reduced to promoting artisanal lifestyle products, leaving them metaphorically standing over huge piles of unsold jam inventory that had been awkwardly tied into their remaining production agreements with Netflix. It was becoming increasingly transparent to international business observers that without a fresh injection of authentic royal proximity, the commercial viability of the Sussex brand in the United States was rapidly evaporating, making a face-to-face meeting with the king an absolute financial and promotional necessity, simultaneously an entirely separate set of vulnerabilities was being exploited on the other side of the Atlantic, where the internal dynamics of the king's personal circle played directly into the hands of the California household. Sources close to the monarch have consistently revealed that the king possesses a deep and abiding longing to reconcile with his youngest son, viewing the ongoing family schism as an unmitigated disaster for the long-term prestige of the crown. The king views the family through a highly traditional lens, heavily influenced by the historical ideals of Queen Victoria, who famously championed the concept of the royal family as the ultimate moral and cohesive model for the nation to emulate. This desire to heal the bitter rift stands in stark and massive opposition to the firm stance maintained by his eldest son and heir, Prince William, who views the situation through a lens of strict institutional protection. This deep ideological divide between the father and the future king created a profound vulnerability within the palace walls, leaving the door open for a sophisticated campaign of leverage that many traditionalists inside the household watched with growing alarm. The tactical nature of this campaign became glaringly obvious during the highly charged week of Royal Ascot, which took place just hours after the initial public revelations regarding Meghan's travel plans had broken in the media. As the senior members of the royal family gathered for the traditional racing festivities, courtiers and close personal friends of the monarch began to privately deploy the highly charged phrase emotional blackmail to describe the behavioral patterns emerging from the Sussex camp. The prevailing sentiment among the palace traditionalists was that Harry and Meghan were deliberately utilizing the presence of their young children as a powerful lever to bounce the king into an immediate face-to-face meeting, knowing full well that the aging monarch would find it almost impossible to resist the opportunity to see his grandchildren. Within hours of these internal concerns, being voiced, the phrase had become a staple of private briefings, indicating a profound level of resentment within the upper echelons of the court. Yet, despite the clear awareness among his senior advisors that he was being systematically manipulated, the king ultimately chose to open the gates of Highgrove, effectively paying the emotional ransom demanded of him, and establishing a precedent that has deeply fractured the internal unity of the royal household. The formal confirmation from Buckingham Palace that the King and Queen did indeed host the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, along with their young children, at Highgrove, represents an extraordinary milestone in this protracted domestic saga. This encounter marked the very first time the monarch had set eyes on young Archie since the tumultuous summer of 2022, and it stands as only the second time he has ever met Princess Lilibet since her birth in California. To fully comprehend how this momentous capitulation occurred, one must examine the deep internal fractures that characterize the current royal administration, where senior staff and advisors are sharply divided into two distinct ideological camps. The institution is effectively split between the Hawks and the Doves, a division that dictates how the palace responds to external threats and family betrayals. The king has firmly established himself as the leader of the Doves, a position that receives strong tactical backing from his deputy private secretary, Theo Rycroft, who is currently being positioned to take over the top administrative role in the household. Conversely, the chief of the Hawks, Clive Alderton, remains deeply opposed to this policy of appeasement, reflecting the firm stance of Prince William, who believes that rewarding hostile behavior only invites further institutional instability. This bitter internal conflict over family policy is far from new, and those with a memory for palace briefings will recall that the phrase emotional blackmail first surfaced within these circles during the intense public disputes of 2024. At that time, a major confrontation erupted regarding the occupancy of Frogmore Cottage and the couple's access to official state security during their visits to the British Isles. Even then, senior courtiers watched with a mixture of dread and disbelief as the monarch continuously facilitated the very manipulation his advisors were warning him against. This pattern of behavior is part of a series of weak political signals that have been emerging from the palace for over a year, showing a strange alignment between the public statements of the king and his younger son on key global issues. These subtle indicators were backed up by much stronger visual signals last year when the media were carefully tipped off to photograph Prince Harry arriving at Clarence House for a brief meeting over tea. Following that encounter, the hawks and the doves immediately retreated to their relative cubbyholes, with the hawks insisting the meeting was entirely inconsequential, while the doves championed it as a wonderful and historic step forward along the road to a total family rehabilitation. What occurred at Highgrove is the ultimate culmination of this massive softening up exercise designed to prepare the global public for the gradual return of the Sussexes to the royal fold. The king's overarching desire to see his family reunited carries profound political consequences because for Prince Harry to operate effectively within the United Kingdom, he requires official state security, an established royal residence, and a restoration of his institutional status. This is precisely why this moment must be viewed as an absolute victory for the California household, because they have successfully maintained their lucrative commercial operations in the United States, while forcing the British head of state to grant them the immense prestige of a private royal audience. While the palace communications team will desperately seek to portray this meeting as a simple act of grandfatherly tenderness and normal family behavior, such a reading completely misunderstands the political reality of the situation. The king is the living embodiment of the state, and every action he takes in relation to his estranged son constitutes an act of official policy, an official policy that many traditionalists now view as a complete and total capitulation to external pressure. The timing of this high-level family reunion is particularly astonishing given the extraordinary events that had unfolded in the British legal system just 3 days prior. In a stunning display of public defiance, Prince Harry had issued a scathing denunciation of a preeminent High Court judge who had just systematically dismissed all 97 of the legal claims brought by the prince and his co-plaintiffs against a major national newspaper group. Rather than accepting the verdict of the court with traditional dignity, the Duke of Sussex responded with an explosive statement that labelled the judicial decision a complete and obvious whitewash, accusing the independent judge of going to extraordinary and unwarranted lengths to exonerate the press. This was a direct and pointed attack on the absolute integrity of the British courts, which officially dispense justice in the name of the sovereign himself. Yet, despite his younger son publicly characterizing a senior member of His Majesty's judiciary as corrupt, the king chose to entirely ignore the constitutional awkwardness of the situation, inviting the prince into his private home for tea just days after the rule of law had been so openly mocked. This extraordinary leniency has sent a wave of profound shock and resentment through the wider British public, who have watched the moral authority of the monarchy steadily erode on the current monarch's watch. The traditional supporters of the crown, the very people who buy the coronation mugs, line the streets for national celebrations and organise community events, look at the Duke and Duchess of Sussex and see two immensely privileged individuals who have spent years trashing the institution on international streaming platforms while collecting hundreds of millions of dollars for their public invective. This profound sense of public outrage is clearly reflected in recent polling data, which reveals that overall popular support for the monarchy has plummeted from 65% down to a historic low of 55% over a remarkably short period. To many dedicated observers, it appears as though the monarch has taken a fragile but perfectly intact institution handed to him by his late mother and completely fractured its public standing within the opening chapters of his reign by continuously favoring personal emotion over structural duty. The individuals most severely impacted by this policy of appeasement are the Prince and Princess of Wales, who are currently carrying the entire structural weight of the working monarchy on their shoulders. Prince William has done nothing other than offer flawless public support to his father, maintaining absolute dignity and respecting the boundaries of royal rank, despite the immense personal pain inflicted upon his own household by the Sussexes' published memoirs. Friends of the Prince of Wales have long made it clear that William was entirely correct in his firm stance regarding past family crises, and he is entirely correct now in his assessment of the danger Harry poses to the future of the crown. By opening the doors of Highgrove, which ironically is legally owned by the Duchy of Cornwall, and therefore belongs to Prince William the King, has not only undermined his heir, but has made the deep ideological divide between the current sovereign and the future king glaringly obvious to the entire world. This public validation provides invaluable fresh material for future media projects, ensuring that the undoing of the historic agreements reached at the Sandringham summit will continue to play out as a highly profitable global drama for many years to come.